Welcome to the Savage Worlds GM podcast. I'm your host, Jared Savage Daddy Gunning. Tonight's episode, like all episodes, brought to you by Roll20.net, the world's largest virtual tabletop. Check them out today at Roll20.net. Follow the show on social media. We're on Facebook and Twitter at SWGM Podcast. Join, subscribe, like, and share the YouTube channel, Savage Worlds Game Master Podcast. Check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/SWGM Podcast. Tonight, we are down Rules Maven, but the show must go on. And tonight's topic, broad strokes. Tonight, we want to talk about expanding mechanics to fit the narrative of your game and some ideas about how to run things a little non-traditionally. If you're watching in the live stream on the YouTube channel, feel free to participate, chat. We will bring that into the conversation in the show tonight. So here to discuss it, Chris, the Savage Mommy Fox.
Okay, so when we screw up rules tonight, we don't want to hear about it.
Yeah, we can't talk about rules tonight. We just can't. So
sure, well we can,
we can, but we're just going to screw it up.
Yeah, well we get to mess it up, and then and then when Dave shows up again next week, we're to go. Way to go, Dave! Nice job. Oh, and also some call him Jib.
They do what? Where? Crap.
Squirrel. Okay, so this kind of is a branch out topic from one of the previous episodes we had not too long ago, where we were talking about interesting applications of dramatic task. A plane crash being one of those. Extended consequences over time. We also were talking, we kind of brought this up, past flavor in a episode where we discussed not having straight pass-fail results on a roll. For example, I think one of the big ones we're talking about was the stagecoach. The stagecoach, getting onto the stagecoach, or doing a Deadlands Western classic trope of horses riding alongside the train and boarding the train at high speed. So let's just kind of revisit that here real quick. Then I want to branch out to other things like skill application, things like that. So none of this, what we're going to talk about tonight, are you necessarily going to find printed out verbatim in the core rules. The core rules doesn't do a lot of here's how you handle this situation, because they're trying to keep the book and print run low and economy of words. Are like, here's the rules, figure it out. It's basically the approach of the core. The core when you get it. It doesn't give you a lot of, for instance, and let me paint you 5 different examples of how this works. It just sort of goes, there's a rule, figure it out, kid, you're on your own.
Well, so, I've said over and over and over again that the designers of Savage Worlds, their intent is, what is the impact of the thing on the game? What it looks like, what it feels like, what it smells like, what it tastes like, that's your problem to come up with.
Yeah, I mean that the whole core of that, Jib, when you bring that up, is so true. By looking at powers, just look at powers, and your statement is right there, front and center, when we talk about powers. Because bolt is bolt. It's up to you as a GM or as a player to say, hey, what does that look like, and how am I going to use it?
Right. And if you're familiar at all with Deadlands Noir, Noir does this great job of what we're talking about tonight, of expanding an existing familiar mechanic, vis-a-vis in the shape and form of interrogation. Interrogation, when you think about it, is really a social conflict. You're trying to get somebody to tell you something they don't want to tell you, but if you torture them enough, they might just tell you anything they think you want to hear, so you shut up and leave them alone. So what the great thing with interrogation does in Deadlands Noir, if you go check it out, I challenge you to pull that book open, look at the setting rules for interrogation, and at the same time pull up the social conflict rules in Savage Worlds and just read them side by side. Interrogation in Deadlands Noir starts with a premise that you have somebody that you've gotten squared away. You can either use intimidation as a strong arm tactic or persuasion to try to be the good cop, bad cop. And at the end of time, based on your margin of success, you get a result out of that interrogation. That's a social conflict rule. On a simpler scale, on an even simpler dumbed down scale, one of the key things that they added to Deadlands Noir, because of the Louisiana tech or a pulp noir feel was the whole idea of the lounge singer, the femme fatale lounge singer. They went, well, there's really not a perform skill in Savage Worlds. It really doesn't exist. So we'll just take knowledge skills, the way that those are put together, and do whatever you want. Just call it perform, parentheses, singing, guitar, drums, piano. And instead of it being attached to smarts, its linked attribute is whatever makes the most sense. If you're a dancer, it's agility, obviously. If it's a musical instrument, it's smarts, because you have to learn how to play it. And then go ahead, and then they built edges in that to allow you to kind of make a roll over time with your perform to earn a buck or two. They came up with a kind of how to get a gig, little tiny, really tiny mechanic. So if you want to use a good template for what we're talking about tonight, pick up Deadlands Noir, because it'll show you how to kind of expand these existing mechanics in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, they've got shadowing, it's got patter, it's got all kinds of things to go along with that interrogation. So yeah. It's a great setting. I'm actually getting ready. Well, not soon, but I'm next up GMing in my Saturday night group, and it's going to be probably 3 or 4 months, but I'm going to run Deadlands Noir for the group.
Cool.
So are there going to be assassins in that game?
No, because that person doesn't play with us anymore. But one of the guys, he's going to play a younger version of himself that was in that other game of mine that kind of didn't finish.
Nice.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. So, I'm going to really try this time, though. I want to try to use those different setting rules to really, show off, Noir a little bit more than I did last time.
Yeah, I'm trying to do the same thing with Pirates of the Spanish Main. Now I am using the setting information and things like that, but I'm using the deluxe rules.
Right.
And we're starting to get there in terms of portraying the pirate-ness of things, but we only play 2-hour sessions, so it's taking us a little bit to get there.
Well, let's talk real quick about one. And here's another one that kind of pops to mind from Deadlands Noir. So, pardon the Deadlands Noir. This is not a love letter. This is not a love letter to Deadlands Noir. The legwork, setting mechanic of that. The idea that you have to go out and beat the pavement, bribe a few people. So they're doing that as basically an extended streetwise roll. But you only make one streetwise roll.
Yep.
And depending on whether it's a failure, a success, or a raise, certain things happen. You still get the information you want, regardless of the streetwise roll, as long as you don't fail it. But on a success, you got beat up and it cost you some money. On a raise, you got off scot-free and only had to pay a little bit of cash to grease some palms, so to speak, to get the information. And that's a good example of an extended application, a broader stroke. To just a basic streetwise roll, and it happens over hours. It doesn't happen like
it can be over days. I mean, I had a player when I was running the Deadlands Noir who basically was looking for. I don't remember. He was either at the newspaper, at the morgue in the newspaper office, or at City Hall. I don't remember which one. And it's a roll, and it was like he rolled. It was like 1d6 days or whatever that he was going to have to be searching for this stuff, and he rolled like a 4. So this was like a 4-day thing. That's what he was doing for 4 days, was trying to locate this information. And he kind of at first was like, oh, 4 days, why is it going to take me 4 days? I said, just kind of, it's almost like a chase. You have to abstract it a little bit. You have to kind of think, okay, you're spending all this time and you're digging through piles and piles of records, and you're going and you're talking to the secretary, and she's trying to help you find. And so just kind of extrapolate it out. And I kind of played it that way too, where he would go talk to the secretary, and I would play her as an NPC, and we would do a little bit of dialogue. So it wasn't just him not getting to be in the game. He had something he was doing, and he was still role playing during that. But it was a long time, and he ended up having to spend kind of a little bit of money, and ended up succeeding.
Yeah. I think that dramatic tasks are one of the best ways to do broad strokes because you can cover a lot of turf that way. With just like what you were talking about with the streetwise roll. In our pirate game last night, another pirate ship came into port, and it had been beaten up in a fight with a Spanish ship, and there were a lot of injured crewmen. So the doctor from our ship went over to help, and I decided rather than going through and doing 18, healing rolls, so we're going to do a healing dramatic task, and you need 5 successes in 5 rounds. If you get 5 successes, you heal everybody. If you get less than that, you heal. You're able to save fewer members of the crew. And she was able to get everybody patched up, but it just let us paint with broad strokes something that you really could have gotten into minutia about.
Right. Yeah, but you didn't need to, and that. Right. Yeah,
but we didn't need to.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. I think that's a very interesting idea. Because and again, you think of that dramatic task. Each one of those checks could have been 10 or 15 minutes. So she's spending an hour or more trying to patch everybody out. Or you could have said each one of those is 30 minutes.
Each healing check is 10 minutes.
Right.
Right.
So she had to spend at least an hour, and that's just to get them stabilized.
Right.
To where they're not going to die in the next 2 minutes.
So at the end of that dramatic task for her, you could have required a vigor roll because she's been up all night.
Yeah, that would have been a good thing.
Saying, hey, let's see if we can avoid fatigue because wow, you've been up all night.
Yeah.
Trying to help everybody. I think we kind of covered this too. I think here's another good example. Dramatic tasks don't have to be centered on one player character either.
No, they don't.
It's not about expanding that out. A dramatic task can be for a phase in each part of this whole thing you're trying to do.
Right.
So yeah, if you're saying, okay, I want to run a heist. Okay, I need the face man to try to, as part of a dramatic task, get through the front door. Give me your persuasion roll to get through the front door. Dramatic task -2. Ooh, 3 successes. All right, you guys are almost there. Do this, do that. I think what each player makes the relevant role in their role in that heist or whatever they're doing in that dramatic task. The thing to remember, though, and I think a lot of GMs, and I'm going to channel Dave for just a second and tell you that don't stop if they get 5 successes by the second round because it's over 5 cards, 5 turns. Now, let's say they get 5 successes by round 2. They don't have to draw. They don't have to roll any more dice, but you draw 3 more cards to see if a complication comes up because a complication could wreck that shit on a club, and they had to deal with that complication in order to succeed or win.
Right. Depending on the dramatic task, I will either go ahead and do the rest of the cards, or I will ask them if they want to stop. It depends on the nature of the dramatic task. But I really like the idea that something bad could happen. You've gotten your 5 successes, so you're going to succeed at the dramatic task, but let's find out if something bad happened along the way.
Right. And it's sort of kind of a pressure luck kind of situation too, where you could always go, hey, all right, you know what? That's 5 successes and 2 cards. Let's go ahead and give a roll. Every success you get after this and raise, you get a Benny. However, if a club complication comes up and you don't pass that complication roll, the whole thing blows up in your face. You walk away with some bennies, but the whole thing blows up in your face.
Yeah. Well,
I think what we've talked about too, a great example of extending the dramatic task is in a cyberpunk esque
that's
setting.
Where I did it. That's where I use them.
Where you got the guy that's going to do the hacking. Okay. Right. All of his combat cards and initiative are his role in a dramatic task to hack the computer. Well, everybody else is involved in combat on the same draw of the card. That's another example of expanding a mechanic to fit the situation.
Yep. Another mechanic you could apply there would be the battle mechanics. The warfare mechanics.
Yeah, the mass combat.
Mass combat.
Mass combat, mass battles.
You could do that. I'm not saying you should, but you could. It would be a way to do it because basically you're doing a sequence of events and you're keeping score. Basically, is what you're doing with the mechanic, but you can apply it different ways. I think a critical element with dramatic tasks or with the mass combat rules is between dice rolls, there must be role playing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's because otherwise it's just like, flip a card, roll some dice, flip a card, roll some dice, flip a card, roll some dice. And it's like, it's not very interesting or exciting. But when you, inject some role playing into it, then the whole thing becomes more dramatic. In the pirate game last night, we didn't run a single round of combat, but we had 3 dramatic tasks.
I'm a fan. I'm a big fan of dramatic task. I've kind of come around a little bit on the chase rules as well. You have to have the players who are involved narrate that abstraction. They have to fill in that blank. Like a great example is like, okay, well, all right, you drew a king on, you got you made a driving roll. You got 3 successes. You drew 3 cards. The highest one's a king. Okay, your opponent has a 5. He's at long range. What did you do? What maneuver? How did that happen?
Tell me.
How are you driving? Like? What are you doing? What's going on? Did you go up on the curb, on the sidewalk, and almost mow down pedestrians to get out of the way to get this far ahead? What did you do? And if you're not narrating those things and building story around the cards and the events, then yeah, it seems almost as flat as a combat where it's like, give me a fighting roll. Okay, roll your damage. Okay, he took a wound. All right, here's a Benny to soak. Okay, he soaked all the wounds. It's
yeah, I think we've mentioned before that, and I don't know where this is located, but I think we've mentioned before that Clint Black did a great post about a chase and basically kind of how to narrate what happens in a chase. And it was like I think it was a boat chase. And that was such a great post because, he talked a lot about, one of the things is there's a law, there's some logs and some stuff floating in the water and you're having to maneuver around it. So that's why, you've dropped back to long range and that boat's gotten and there's this whole thing that he did and it was really, really cool. I wish I could remember exactly where it was.
I want to say it's a G post in the Savage Worlds G plus community. I want to say it's probably where it is. If not, always check the forums or just check the archive of the Pet Gang forum.
Yeah, I'll email Clint and say, hey, where's that post?
Right. Well, okay. Let's say I'm running a James Bond Savage Worlds, and one of the big things about James Bond is always the seduction role. He's always seducing some femme fatale, trying to get access to the main big bad guy's lair or something. Right. He's trying to get information. So how do you extend that? Well, you make it a social conflict using persuasion, and you set a margin of victory as a GM. So whoever has the highest margin of victory, if Bond gets 5 or greater, not only does he get all the information, not only is the seduction successful, she's in love with him. She's actually head over heels in love with him, which creates its own problems for her to get mowed down later on dramatically. But
right.
No, that never happens.
Yeah. Or she leads him into a trap. He gets the information he wants. He gets what he wants, but she leads him into a trap if he didn't get at least, a 2 margin of success. So you can very easily do those sort of things with a social conflict as persuasion for seduction. We talked about this before. Well, how do you do a Mission Impossible disguise type thing? It's a simple persuasion roll. The whole point of a disguise is to convince somebody or persuade them that you're someone other than you are. So, oh well, what if I've got a stormtrooper uniform? We talked about this, I think, last time, but let's kind of like talk about that Han Solo, Luke Skywalker thing. Okay, well, we knocked out a couple stormtroopers. We took their outfit. Now we're going to put Chewbacca in what appear to be chains, lead him into the detention center, and that's how we'll get into the detention center. That's a disguise maneuver. Okay, Han Solo, his outfit, his stormtrooper armor fits perfectly. He's got a +2 to his persuasion roll. Of course, Han Solo's persuasion roll sucks in that movie. He rolled a bunch of criticals. But Luke Skywalker, on the other hand, shorter, a little short for a stormtrooper. Doesn't necessarily fit all that great.
That's not true. I just saw a Facebook post that proves that that's not the case. He's not shorter than a stormtrooper. It was the fact they were using 2 of the action figures, these Star Wars action figures, and measuring them. It was really funny. I saw that just right before we came on. It's like, oh, that's funny.
Right. So I mean, if you have time to make, okay, so what do you go about this? Well, I want to make this elaborate mask out of latex, and okay, give me a repair roll to create this disguise. And on a success, it gives you a +1. On a raise, it gives you a +2 to a persuasion roll. It's all persuasion roll.
Right.
And what you're trying to do as far as a disguise. We're just talking about that as an extension. Some of the other things that you can do too, like you hear this all the time. Well, what about you're stalking somebody, you're shadowing somebody. Dramatic task featuring stealth versus notice.
Yeah,
opposed dramatic task.
Noir.
Yep.
Yeah.
But Deadlands Noir has a shadowing mechanic, and that's what it is. It's basically a dramatic task.
Yep, it's an opposed dramatic task as well, right? So
yes. Yep.
Instead of you just rolling your stealth at a -2, you're rolling your stealth that gets a target's persuade or notice.
Notice, yep. And so you're actively working against that other person. Right. I think that's good too. Is to make these things more active, to make sure that you have somebody that or something that you're working against sometimes.
Yeah, I think from a broad strokes standpoint, making things more meaningful by making them more immediate and more personal and more relevant to what they're doing. Like in the pirate game last night, our gambler went to play cards and dramatic task, and he failed. He failed bad and ended up losing a lot of money over it. Spoilers.
Does he owe someone a favor?
No, he had enough cash to cover what he lost, but he will not be having as good a time in port.
Awesome.
And if he wants to have a good time, he's going to have to borrow some money.
Yep.
Or make a persuasion roll that he just won a big gambling pot. Maybe he could persuade somebody to, cut him a line of credit when he doesn't really have the money to cover it.
Yep.
Yeah, because that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Nothing bad could come of that.
It's going to add to the story at the end of the day. I mean, really.
Yeah, there you go.
So, I mean, can you guys think of anything that applies more towards like an extended result from an action? I know we've kind of talked about dramatic task being an extended, a way to extend an action over time. What about extending results over time? You guys ever do that? Where you make them make a streetwise roll? Or you say, okay, so we narrate this out. You're gonna go hit up Jimmy the Fix, but he's got to check a couple of his contacts and he'll get back to you. And then later on in the game, require the roll, or let them make the roll right then and there. You've already determined it's a success, but they don't get the benefit of that roll till later on in the story. Have you guys ever encountered that in a game or used that in a game?
We haven't, but I really haven't. It'd be easy enough to do.
Because I think it's this kind of unexplored thing with role players. It's like, I want to roll dice and get an immediate answer.
Right.
So I don't know.
It could be very similar to the FFG Star Wars, where not so much on the player's part, but on the GM's part, if a player rolls, what's called a threat or a despair, doesn't have to happen right away. That can happen later on in the game. And so you could certainly, do that same thing here. So, as an example, like you said, you go talk to your Jimmy the Fix, and you end up failing the roll. Okay. Thing doesn't happen necessarily right away, but the road, you're given wrong information, or you're given, go to this place, and somehow when you get to the building, maybe Jimmy hasn't set you up, but somebody in his group or something has set you up, and now you're walking into a trap, and it's a few days after you made the roll because you failed.
Right. Well, actually, okay. Let's kind of branch this, because I don't think as GMs we talk about this as much. I think we tend to apply a little more GM fiat than a randomizer to our NPCs. So there's a great example, Chris. Let's talk about an extended outcome from a roll, where you make the roll in the beginning of the session, and a session later, or at the end of the session, the event arises. So you may go see Jimmy the Fix, and you may get a raise on your Streetwise roll. And Jimmy the Fix goes, no problem. I'll call in a few favors. I got you covered. I'll make sure you have the guns you need down by the pier, 12 p.m. on the dot Tuesday. And then, as a GM, I make a Streetwise roll for Jimmy the Fix, and he fails it. Or I make a Streetwise roll for Jimmy the Fix, and he makes it. I don't know too many GMs that do the randomizer for the NPC that they're requiring from the PC, and then bringing that into the story. What do you guys think of that as a concept?
I actually really like that. That's interesting.
I like that a lot. I use dice and mechanics to make determinations for what NPCs do a lot. Because I don't want anything to be arbitrary if I can help it. So I will roll dice to see if NPCs have a thought, or have some kind of understanding of what's happening, and things like that. So yeah, I love that idea.
And I do that a lot too, and I'll just do it as a percentage roll. High he does X, low he doesn't do X.
Right, because one of the great things about Savage Worlds is it's not necessarily balanced as combat encounters and math so much, but it is balanced in that anything the NPC can do or the PC can do, the NPC can do as well. So if I'm talking to a fixer, he's got Streetwise, he's got Persuasion, or he should as an NPC, and I should be rolling that as the GM. I should be rolling that instead of necessarily making a GM fiat decision. Now, there's nothing wrong with making a GM fiat decision in the fixer story.
To give a little bit of flesh and bones to NPCs and have some idea of what their attributes are and what their skills are and what their, do they have any edges or hindrances? You don't have to get into, minute detail about it. We've said many times, because this is also a painting in broad strokes kind of thing. For your average soldier, D6 and everything, and maybe a D8 in shooting. And, maybe one interesting edge that they can employ or something like that. But, definitely wild card NPCs need to have a full character sheet of information about them.
Right, because they're the named characters. They're not just Mook number 3 or extra number police officer number 4. And you don't necessarily, here's the thing too. So let's say in that situation, Jimmy the Fix screws up and he can't deliver. You don't necessarily have to make that punish the players or set them up for a TPK to make it interesting. So in that situation, he failed the notice roll. He called in one too many favors, couldn't pay off and keep all those plates spinning and keep all that juggling in the air. And you show up at the warehouse and they pull the door open and there's Jimmy the Fix sitting tied to a chair in the middle of the warehouse, the empty warehouse, bloodied and beaten. And he just looks up and goes, "Run!" And you look down and there's a time bomb ticking underneath the chair. that is perfectly adequate story-wise for what happened with that notice or that roll you made.
Yeah.
To determine the outcome that doesn't fuck the players.
And
Pardon my French.
and by not making just that arbitrary, it's an NPC, they always succeed roll, you know, you're adding to the story, and you're giving yourself as a GM
now
more opportunities
right
to add.
Now, what I will say is, if the player put dice down to find that NPC to get information, and they got successes to do that, I'm not going to have the NPC roll to see if they can find it. The player character did that when they rolled the streetwise roll. But if it's like a persistent contact and they're going to them for information, sure, I can totally see the logic behind what you're saying. I don't disagree. The only caveat I would put on that is if the player has put dice down to make something happen, then I'm not going to have the NPC put dice down too.
Right, because you don't want to cancel the player's
right.
success.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that.
Right.
I could. So you'd have to use it in the right condition, the right way,
sparingly. Yeah, not as always your go-to. But you could do the same thing too. Like, okay, terrorists have wired this elevator to explode when it hits the 3rd floor. Okay, I'm going to do a dramatic task before the game even starts. I know that's one thing that's happened. I'm going to do a dramatic task for the terrorists using repair and see how good the bomb is. So that when I get to the point where they're going to disarm it, I know it's a for shit bomb. It wasn't put together well. -1 instead of -2 on your dramatic task. This thing looks like it was thrown together in a moving van minutes before it was put in place. Go ahead and give me your dramatic task rolls. I just want to kind of explore the idea of making NPC rolls, like you were requiring rolls from the player character to see what the outcome is.
Right.
Just because it's a surprise for you as a GM as well.
Right.
It's like, okay, I don't have to decide what happens. Is it highly critical? No, let's roll some dice. Oh, shit. He got bad information. Oh, Jimmy the Fix got bad information, and he pissed off the wrong person asking that question.
Right. Or maybe he got good information, but he pissed off the wrong person getting it.
Right.
And so they're going to come after Jimmy. So Jimmy's now going to come to the player characters going, look, man, I got you the information you needed, but they're after me, man. You gotta help me out. You gotta get me out of the city. You gotta hide me or something. You've now injected more drama into the game because of the thing.
And the player still gets what they want, what they rolled for.
Right.
Right. But now there's this wrinkle. Oh shit. Oh, now we gotta hide Jimmy the Fix. We gotta put him in a safe house. We gotta figure someone to smuggle him out of town. Yeah.
I like it. I think that's a very interesting idea.
Yeah, I dig it.
So we talked about ways to resolve things with a simple roll, ways to resolve things with an extended roll. Ways to resolve. We've always talked in the past about, hey, if it doesn't matter, don't make anybody roll for it.
Right.
I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that GMs make is always requiring a trade check, always requiring a roll, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, make that notice roll.
If there's a ladder with steps, I'm not going to ask for a climbing roll. There's a freaking ladder.
Right. Also, if they need the thing to move forward in the game, don't have them roll for it. Or if you have them roll for it, it's not to determine whether they find it or not. It's to determine if something else interesting happens at the same time.
Right. So we talked about this, right? So let's run this one down again one more time, because I just want to kind of expand on it a little bit and talk about it. So we're in a Wild West adventure. You're outlaws. The PCs are outlaws, and it's a train. It's a runaway train situation. We're gonna board and rob everybody in the first class car on this train.
Right.
So we're waiting. There's a couple ways we can do this. I can just cut right to the action of they're galloping alongside. And how do we get on the train? Do I make a jump roll? Or do I require a simple agility roll for them? And if they succeed on it, they jump off the horse, no problem, and find handholds and footholds, and they're on top of the car, wherever they want to be on the train. That's kind of one way to do it. Just everybody give me an agility check to see if you make it. Or I could do, okay, well, let's lie in wait. Give me your stealth roll, and I've got a couple of armed guards on the train making opposed notice rolls because they expect to be jumped. Do I run it as a dramatic task? If I've got 5 guys on 5 horses, do I run it as a dramatic task for everybody to succeed by everybody making an agility roll or a riding roll for the horse? How do you, I mean, because there's a myriad number of ways as a GM that you can handle that particular setting.
Or do I need them to get on the train? Therefore, you narrate how you get on the train, and it happens.
That could happen as well.
Right. Now, getting on the train, I'm probably going to have some dice on the table, but it's not to decide whether they get on the train or not. It's to decide if something else interesting happens too.
Right.
Because
here's what
I'm following the Powered by the Apocalypse rule of they get what the thing. It's just a question of whether something else interesting happens or not.
Right. I'm a fan of this. You're automatically going to get on the train. That's a given.
Right.
I need agility rolls to see if you get any bumps and bruises for levels of fatigue as a result
of
how you get on the train.
Yeah.
So either you're getting on the train with no wound penalties, no fatigue penalties, or you're getting on the train kind of busted up from bumps and bruises that are going to last for 24 hours. Because this is a rough trade kind of proposition.
Yeah. How many times have we seen in movies the guy, they rides up beside the train, he does the jump onto the train, and then like smashes into the side of the car really hard. It's like, ugh. And
or misjudges it and slides down 3 rungs and gets a little beaten up, bagged up, and then gets back up. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, and I think that's kind of an overlooked thing. Here's the thing to understand. And I want to kind of like throw this out to the newbies who may be watching the show. Not everything has to result in a wound. You can get the same effect with fatigue. And fatigue will give you a -1. It makes things more difficult for the player characters when they're making rolls because a -1 a level of fatigue has the same effect mechanically as a wound, as a single wound. However, they don't waste bennies trying to soak fatigue. And then secondly, it goes away in 24 hours. Unlike wounds that you have to wait 5 days before you get a chance to roll them away if they're not healed. So bumps and bruises. Oh, if you're running like a heroic level game and they fall down the side of a mountain, give me an agility roll to -2 not to suffer a 1 level of fatigue from bumps and bruises. Not okay. Well, oh shit, this could be a dramatic task for agility. And if you don't succeed, you end up with 3 wounds at the bottom and a broken leg. And no. How do you do throwing? Where's the skill for throwing somebody?
I mean, we've talked about that. And to me, it's a grapple and then a throwing roll because throwing is a skill.
To me, it's a push maneuver and will always be a push maneuver.
It can be a push maneuver. If you wanted it to be a bit more granular, you could say it's a grapple plus a strength check plus a throw. To see if, 1, you can get a hold of them, 2, you have the strength to move them, and 3, if you can put them where you want them.
Yeah, you could do it that way as well.
It's all a question of how granular you want to be about it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, my thought is just quick and dirty. That's why I always say, or my thought is always a grapple and a throw. It's
well,
dirty.
I have no gripe with that as an answer. Nor do I have a gripe with doing it as a push.
Well, here's why I lead towards a push. What's the end intended effect? Is to put them back 6 inches, throw them in another direction. To me, whether you
somewhere other than where they are,
whether
preferably
you physically
in a bad spot.
Whether you physically push them or somehow place them where you want them, the easiest, fastest thing to do, just give me opposed strength rolls.
Yeah.
For a push. A grapple to me is I'm trying to put you in a headlock. I'm trying to restrain you. My intent is to get a hold of you and keep a hold of you.
Right.
So I tend to break the two apart. But that's just me.
But see, I don't see it that way, because my thought is, from the way I see it, what I'm exactly saying is you grapple, you get a hold of them, then you throw them. You're not trying to keep a hold of them. You're grappling them to get a hold so you can throw them. I mean, think of in the wrestling ring, if somebody's going to do a body slam, it's a grapple, and then it's a throw. You know, they're going to grapple them, they're going to pick them up, and then they're going to throw them.
Right, except for the rules, the kind of way the rules are written for grappling is they get a chance to wiggle free on their next action, and if you maintain the grapple, you just roll strength damage. But I can see what you're saying. If you want to go, instead of damage, the strength being damage, have the strength be a push or a throw, opposed, then sure, go for it. Here's the great thing about Savage Worlds: you can't really fuck it up.
I was gonna say neither one of those that we've said is
gonna break the game.
Yeah,
neither one of those is gonna ruin your game and go, oh Jesus, holy shit, we had a TPK because Jared insisted on a push instead of a grapple, push and a throw. Holy shit! No, that doesn't happen in Savage.
Nope.
It's however you want to do it.
I have never seen Savage Worlds break that way.
Not. No, I think it breaks more because people want to disregard rules or change rules.
Right. That's when Savage Worlds breaks.
Without really knowing the consequences.
Yeah, when people disregard rules or decide that, magic trumps ranged combat, trumps melee combat, and so they have to rewrite the rules to make it work. I'm like, no, you don't. You just have to use them all.
So let's talk about this one, for example, because we haven't really talked much about powers in Savage Worlds and talking about broad strokes and powers. What if, as a broad stroke, I want to have my mage create a relic? Now, I know you can. I'm going to say this right now. Yes, you can absolutely go to the Fantasy Companion, and there's a whole section on rules for creating magic items. But for the sake of what we're talking about here, if you don't have a copy of the Fantasy Companion, you're looking at core. Could you do this as a dramatic task using spell casting and let them spend the power points that the successful spell would cause, and then go, hey, now you have a single-use magic item with one charge in it?
And part of your dramatic task could be getting the components and getting the parts for that magic item. That could be a round, because I know you've mentioned before that a dramatic task doesn't have to be one task,
one skill.
It can be multiple different skills. So you do a dramatic task where part of it is you have to go get X, Y, and Z components in order to build this thing, and then you have another part of the dramatic task that's actually,
knowledge woodworking or repair.
Right, yeah. And so the what you need to do to make it, and then you make the spellcasting roll to imbue it with the magic. So you can definitely walk it through without having to have the Fantasy Companion.
Yeah,
and here's my opinion.
Can absolutely do that. I think just because I'm that much of an asshole. If somebody wanted to make a relic level, artifact level magic item in a game, that's going to take some doing. The rules are not complicated, but it's going to take some doing, because there are going to be at least one, probably multiple, quests to try to find all the bits and pieces and components and things and doodads and whatnots and spells and all those things that you need to do the ritual. And you have to figure out how to do the ritual or design the ritual. And then you have to do the ritual and, just.
Yeah. And there might be some opposing forces who want to try to keep you from getting those parts.
Exactly.
So you might have a combat part of it.
Let's just say we're talking about basic potions then. I'm just talking about basic potions. I'm not talking about, maybe relic was the wrong word to use.
Yeah, because, when you said relic, my first thought was I probably wouldn't even let them do that until they were, way like heroic or higher.
I would consider doing this. Okay, this is me applying that. So we're talking what Jib's talking about and what Chris are talking about, the concept of a high-powered relic item. Then I would let them, after character creation, for this one relic creation, go ahead, buy the weird science. Go ahead and buy weird science as an edge. Use your spell casting, but we're going to do this thing where you're going to have to go on a quest in the game and complete like maybe an investigation dramatic task over 2 or 3 sessions, so on and so forth. But once you get there, you create that at whatever rank you want that to be, but you have to buy PowerPoint's edge, and it has that PowerPoint, and it works just like a weird science device from that point on. The device itself has 20 PowerPoints, or how many ever you have when you create it, and you keep track of those PowerPoints, and it drains and recharges. I mean, you could absolutely just apply the weird science mechanics that are in the game.
Here's an interesting twist you could put on creating a magic item that to create a magic item, one of the things you have to do as a spellcaster is permanently spend the PowerPoints to cast the spell for the effect on the thing. So if you wanted to make magic armor, I think the armor spell is 3 PowerPoints. You permanently lose 3 PowerPoints.
That makes sense. That works for me.
Yeah.
You are spending your magic permanently and putting it into this thing. Now that doesn't mean you can't go buy more PowerPoints the next time you advance.
Right.
But you lose those 3 forever.
Right, and those 3 refresh, right?
No.
On the same, no? I mean, no, for the armor.
Oh, no, they're permanent in the armor. The armor is always...
Permanent armor 3.
Yeah, permanent armor 3. But you have permanently spent those PowerPoints.
That makes sense. I mean, that's an elegant talk. That's a very simple, hey, here's an expanded broad stroke. You want to do something like that? Sure. That's really a simple solution.
Yeah.
That works.
Imbue it with your power. I like that. That's interesting. Yeah. And you're not hamstringing them by saying, those 3 are gone, but you can always buy more. I mean, you're gonna have to spend an edge on it, but you can buy more.
Yeah.
And that would make somebody think, okay, well, how many permanent PowerPoints, how many do I want to spend on this? How many am I willing to take from my pool that I'm not going to get back?
Okay, so I've got a staff, Jib. I'm going to imbue that with bolt and just start throwing bolts out of my staff whenever I want.
Right.
With no recharge required for the staff.
You
By spending 2 PowerPoints?
I think you need to permanently pour PowerPoints into the staff. And you can spend PowerPoints to cast bolt from it, and then they refresh overnight.
Okay, so at that point, it's almost like a weird science device, though.
It is. It's basically working like a weird science device.
Yeah, the staff holds so many PowerPoints. When you're out of PowerPoints in the staff,
right, it recharges.
No longer auto fires. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's fine. I don't think that would make something overpowered because it's got X amount of PowerPoints, and once they're gone, you're going to have to wait. So I wouldn't say that you would have to permanently put your PowerPoints into something like that. I guess it kind of really depends on the item that you're trying to create.
Yeah.
Right, what you're doing with it. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I'm just going to throw this from the live chat, and I'm going to butcher the name. So if you're playing the drinking game and it says Savage Daddy mispronounces something, here's your chance to fill in that spot. Zoner Rammer. Closest I could get. They chasing the train? Chase rules? Question mark? Absolutely. We're talking about our Wild West example where the banditos are trying to get on the train. That could totally be run as a chase.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would as a chase though, boy, it would be really, really rough on them because you have to compare speeds. And that train is going to be much, much faster than the horses. So that the train, the conductor, the engine, however you're playing the chase, that train is, I think, what is it? Is it a +2 because it's faster?
Yep. You get +2 on your dice rolls
right,
to
on
draw
your dice
cards,
roll. So,
draw action
but
cards.
when you think about it, I guess it makes sense. I mean, it would be a train going out at full speed would, normally be a little bit quicker than a horse. I mean, of course, in the movies, the horses are just as fast as the train, but that's because it's cinematic.
But as we said earlier too, it's about is it pivotal to your plot that they get on the train?
Right.
Then don't leave it to chance.
By the
Don't make it
way,
a chase
a
roll.
horse
Don't make
will
it
only run for about a mile.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a key. What you just said, Jared, is if it's pivotal, don't make it rely on the dice roll, because then when they fail that dice roll, then you're like, oh well, shit, they were supposed to get on the train, and now they didn't, and that's because you as a GM didn't let them get on the
chance.
Train.
Yeah, you left it to
Like
chance.
I said, don't make the dice roll determine whether they get on the train or not, but whether something else interesting happens.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And like Jared said, it could be as easy as bumps and bruises. Make a vigor roll, and it could be as easy as that.
Yeah, totally.
So you have to kind of look at it that way. So what do you want out of this chase for the train? Look at that, come up with what you want to get out of this, and then go from there.
Yep. Absolutely.
What he said.
Mm-hmm. And now, if you were to run that as a chase, let's just play with that for just a second. I want to pick up that and play with that piece of putty for a moment. Here's the thing: as if you're going to run that as a chase, now the conductor is making piloting rolls or driving rolls for the train every round.
But that's a minor thing.
Mm-hmm. So now I've got the possibility that the train is going to encounter a complication. And the rule table is going to tell me that there's a major or minor obstacle. That's not going to work for this scenario. So as a GM, I'm going to have to get inventive and go, oh, he can't get the boiler. The boiler blew up. The engine, the smokestack caved in on itself. Oh, his speed is being reduced this round. If he doesn't make this repair roll to get it working, you're going to have to kind of adapt to that, and then you're going to have to kind of set. Here's the one thing that you need to remember about doing a chase. If you're going to do a chase in Savage Worlds, you have to set a win condition, a finish line condition. So you have to say, this is going to be a 3-round chase, only 3 rounds. And if the train isn't boarded within 3 rounds, then, or isn't stopped within 3 rounds, then that's it. You guys are watching the back of the caboose going away from you, and you're gonna have to ride back into town and figure some other way to do this. So just understand that you want to apply chase conditions, because you don't want it to be this never-ending make a riding roll, draw cards, attack, make a riding roll, draw cards, attack, make a riding roll, draw cards, attack. That's why everything in Savage Worlds, for a dramatic task, a chase, social conflict, tends to be 3 to 5 rounds. 5 being the ideal amount of rounds that you'll see for a dramatic task. Can you have a 3-round dramatic task?
Sure.
Do you still require 5 successes? It's a little harsh, but sure. I mean, it's a little harsh, but
it would be harsh.
Or maybe you only require 3 because you're trying to keep it short. Yeah, you can do that. But it's so much more fun when it's 5. It really is. And we talked about this too, like the plane crash thing, where every character is making a roll in that dramatic task to see whether or not the plane stays up in the air or crash lands in the Andes. And then they have to make a spirit roll not to eat each other. Or a persuasion roll to go, hey, listen, Bob, your leg is busted, man. We're not getting off this mountain. There's no food. Your leg is broken. Come on, it's time to it's time to put some skin in the game. You take one for the team. We're gonna eat your leg.
You're never gonna walk on it. You're never gonna walk on it again. You're never gonna walk on it again. So let's just let's take that thing off.
Holy shit! You crashed in the Andes. Oh, now you hear wolves coming. As you wake up in a daze, there's wolves in the distracted cab. Oh shit! Yeah. So, but that's for another episode. Broad strokes and how to keep turning the flame up, so to speak.
It ratcheted up.
All right. Unless we have any more comments in the live stream, which I don't necessarily see, I think we're all good. At this point, I think we've sufficiently beaten this horse.
It's cool.
Talking about extended actions, extended rules, and applications. So until next time, this is your host, Jared Savage Daddy Gunning for Jib.
Yo.
And Chris saying keep rolling and stay savage.